Hey, fellow Kotanas, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kopivian. Today, I'm doing my top 10 favorite episodes from the very tough Season 6 of Supernatural. So, without further ado, let's carry on. Number 10, 2.5 Men. This episode was fun mainly because of the fact we get a shapeshifter baby. In a season where monsters started to do things a little bit differently and go a little bit wacko, it was a very interesting episode. And to see Sam and Dean treat a monster baby as just a human baby, a really fascinating thing and a really interesting mindset moving forward in this season. And then there were none. A worm crawling inside your brain to make you go wacko crazy is just the thing Supernatural needs, correct? In this episode, it was all hands on deck, literally. Bobby, Rufus, Sam and Dean, Glenn, and Samuel Campbell. A crazy episode, a wild episode, and one with some tragic endings to some pretty interesting characters, but also a rightful ending to one in particular who betrayed his only grandsons, Sam and Dean, and Samuel deserved every bit of that. I mean, it kind of is a saving situation too, because he does get possessed by the con worm, but at the same time, the character clearly was not going to stick around very long. I would have liked to see the character of Gwen stick around just a little bit longer, because I thought she was a really interesting character and a really smart character, but unfortunately the con worm got into Dean. But it was just a really great who's who kind of episode, and kind of a diehard situation too. Either you figure out the situation and beat the bad guy, or you end up being the bad guy. I think that goes back to the quote of the Dark Knight, right? Number 8, live free or twy hard. Speaking of die hard, this episode was actually good because of the fact that you get to see Sam really show that he isn't the Sam that we all know and love. And you also get to see more of how the vampire infection works, and more of how what happens when you get turned into a vampire. But it also delves deep into the lore of the vampire, with the alpha vampire coming into play, and what the effect of the mother of all is having on everybody in her calls to the monsters and around the world, and especially in this case with Dean turning into a vampire, no thanks to Sam, with no soul. Awesome episode, very cool episode, and yes, those are not vampires, those are douchebags. Not afraid to say it and agree with Dean on that. Number 7, The Man Who Knew Too Much. The wall has come crumbling down, no thanks to Kaz, and you are thrown right into Sam's grapefruit. A incredible season finale that ended a really not on par season for Supernatural. It really wasn't the greatest season to that Supernatural would have, but it still served its purpose in keeping the story of Sam and Dean going, and it did have some interesting moments. This was one of them. Castiel has clearly turned to the dark side, working with Crowley to open the door of Purgatory because he wants to fight Raphael. Turns out in the end he double crosses Crowley after Crowley double crosses him, and it just goes bonkers from there as Castiel performs his own ritual to bring the souls of Purgatory into him and becomes the new god. The betrayal hurts as a fan of Kaz and as a fan of Supernatural in general, but in the end, it was actually the right call, I feel, but it was also a very, very, you're disappointed in Castiel, and you're disappointed in the decisions that one of the characters is making, similar to Sam with Ruby from season 4. Sam, of course, finds the pieces that he needs, but is clearly not all there to help Dean and Bobby stop Castiel. Number 6, You Can't Handle the Truth. I like this one mainly because the creature in this one is the god of truth, Veritas, and it's a very interesting creature, and it's also interesting to see how it affects Sam without a soul. If you don't have a soul, you can't tell the truth because you don't feel any guilt or honesty or anything about anything. And how all of this affects all the characters around Dean and Sam is incredibly interesting. An amazingly interesting episode in how the brothers interact with each other when one of them is not telling the truth and one of them definitely knows it. But by the end of the episode, the full truth comes out and we see the beating of a lifetime from Dean to Sam. That was brutal to see. Number 5, Appointment in Samara. Dean has to become death for a day in order to save Sam's soul from the cage. And to also save it from being torn apart between Michael and Lucifer any further. Always loved seeing Julian Richings as Death in Supernatural. He was always a great character, always a great actor. And this one, again, showcased that to a T. Dean becoming Death and having to make some decisions that he doesn't really like, and not really being able to tell people why he is doing what he has to do, because he doesn't understand the natural order, and because Sam and Dean by this point have already disrupted the natural order on a few thousand occasions. But again, it's that life and death thing. What does it all mean? And this show asked those questions greatly, and I think it also answered them by the end really, really well, as best as a TV show could. But yeah, Appointment in Samara was definitely awesome to just see Death back, and Robert Englund. I actually forgot he was in this episode until I rewatched it just a little bit ago, and it was a shock. I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's right, Robert Englund was in this show. Always great to see Freddy back in another movie or TV show, whatever it may be. Number 4, The French Mistake. What can be said about this episode that hasn't already been said by fans or by anybody a part of the Supernatural production team? A great episode, and the fact that they kind of travel to our world to a degree where there is no magic or anything that would give angels or give demons any power over us or any power to themselves. It's just a really interesting and fascinating show, but it's also funny how Dean and Sam poke fun at themselves as Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles poke fun at themselves and poke fun of their trailers, and hey, at least Sam gets to marry fake Ruby, right? Such a fun episode, and like I said, nothing's been said about this episode that hasn't been said already. Awesome, memorable episode. But the fact that it's not my number 1 should tell you a lot about what number 1 is or could be. Number 3, Frontierland. Dean finally gets to live out his boyhood dream of being a cowboy. And a nice little nod to Walker, Texas Ranger, who Jared Padalecki would later play after Supernatural would end. Awesome episode to get the cult back into the story, but to also introduce the Phoenix character is a really, really just all well put together episode. And like I said, season 6, it wasn't the greatest season for Supernatural, but things like French Mistake, Frontierland, and even this season finale, The Man Who Knew Too Much, all really made this season what it was, and it was actually a pretty good season in the end. While again, pacing and certain things could have been better with the story and with how they may have hit on points a little bit better or a little bit faster. That's kind of a moot point at this point, but this was so cool just to see Sam and Dean go back to the Wild West days and have a little bit of a two-step in good time in Deadwood. Number 2, Let It Bleed. I wish they would have done more with the ideas of H.P. Lovecraft. I think introducing something like Cthulhu physically would have been a fascinating idea, and or any of the above, as is Thoth or Nyarlathotep or any of the other gods or old ones or anything else would have been a really fascinating idea to pull from Purgatory, but it is what it is. Maybe one day. This was a very awesome episode, just from the point of view of things are starting to really come to a head for Bobby, Sam, and Dean and Castiel as well. And it's really kind of at that breakneck pace that Supernatural always gets to when they're getting closer and closer to a season finale or even a series finale. Things just pick up more and more over the course of the season, and after the rug's kind of pulled out from underneath all of us with Castiel's betrayal and subsequent becoming new god, and the fact that in this episode of Let It Bleed, it would be the point where Lisa and Ben's story for Dean would come full circle, and in the way that it would come full circle, especially with everything going on between the brothers and Bobby and Castiel as well. It was just such a heartbreaking episode, but it was also important to tie up the loose ends. So hard to see Lisa and Ben go. You really like them as a Supernatural fan, but sadly, in order to protect them, Dean knew what he had to do, and it was the hardest decision he ever had to make in his life. I believe in Supernatural, there was no decision that Dean had to make that was harder than that. The fact that he didn't wipe his memory clean, but wiped only their memories clean, just adds to the pain of that moment and the guilt that he would live with for the rest of the seasons. Let It Bleed, for me, it had everything that I could have asked for it. Number 1, Weekend at Bobby's. After Bobby sold his soul to Crowley in season 5 to be able to walk again and to get information as well, it finally comes to a head in this situation where we are not with Sam and Dean throughout the entirety of the episode, but we are with Bobby throughout the entirety of the episode. However, we do get glimpses of Rufus, we do get glimpses of Sam and Dean throughout this episode. So they're there, but we also find a different tool in the bag of hunters that was actually very interesting, and one that I think could have been utilized more as the seasons went on, and sad part is it wasn't. That is the idea that demons are essentially just spirits of human that were once human, that go to hell and get twisted, and some get more powerful than others, but it was still a really good episode, and it was an episode that really just takes you into a different viewpoint in the world of Supernatural that was really, really needed. And to see Sam and Dean at the end of it, after Bobby has his big blow up with Sam and Dean over the phone about him every once in a while needing help and everything else, it's just such a complete episode, and the introduction of burning the bones of the demon in order to kill them or get information out of them. Really wish that would have stayed for a lot longer than what it clearly did, because it actually makes a lot of sense in the realm of Supernatural, but It was a very emotional episode and a very needed episode, especially in season 6, where things were kind of, even at this point, were a little different with Sam and Dean, and a little wonky as well within the entire world happenings of monsters and something calling them and something bringing them to the United States. So, I'm going to end this episode right here. I thank you all so much for watching. Always remember to imagine your dream, create your happiness, and live your life on the edge. And I will see you in that next episode. See ya.